Democrats are signaling they may force votes tied to the Iran conflict while leadership scrambles to keep DHS funding and other priorities on track. Energy interventions meant to blunt price spikes are adding new economic pressure that could reshape the legislative lineup. We'll look at how all of these forces converge on Capitol Hill with Loren Duggan, Deputy News Director at Bloomberg Government. Loren, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It was a busy week last week, even though the House was on recess. So let's start there. The Republicans from the House spent most of the week on a policy retreat. They talked a lot. Did they get anything accomplished?
Well, I think they're trying to lay out their plans for this year, which is an election year and always one where you want to be aligned as a party and moving forward. They had the chance to meet with the president, who talked to them a lot about some of his vision for things he'd like to see and kind of come up with some strategy for the rest of the year, in particular probably taking action on another party line, mostly tax and spending bill, which was the dominant bill from last year. I don't think it would be as big as that, but certainly there was a lot of discussion about that our reporters who were on the ground were hearing about.
Now that they've come back, clearly the conflict in the Middle East is going to be top of mind. We've heard about war power votes. We've heard about oversight hearings. We've heard about a potential for a supplemental. What's going to consume their energy?
I think the first is kind of getting back and hopefully hearing from some agency folks. There's been some requests to have more hearings with them. And John Thune, the majority leader, had said that maybe we'll use some of this upcoming budget discussions we're already going to have. A lot of cabinet officials and sub-cabinet officials should be coming in for those in the coming weeks and months. But there will be a push from some Democrats, especially in the Senate, to potentially have votes and force debate around war powers resolutions. We saw some of those right away in the immediate aftermath of the launch of the attacks. But because of the procedures they're trying to tap into, they can force some more votes. And I think we'll probably see that. On the supplemental front, we don't have a request in hand yet from the administration. There's some discussion about that coming maybe later this month, and there'll be a lot of interest in that. And that might take a lot of time off the floor as they consider what to move on the Iran front and also what to move in addition to that, because that could be an attractive vehicle for other things. For example, some senators were talking about farm aid, possibly hitching a ride. Anytime you're having an appropriations bill, it will be an attractive target for other subjects as well.
Well, this conflict is trickling out into several other spaces. One is DHS and the fact that DHS still doesn't have its permanent funding bill. How are all of the security issues playing to shape that debate now?
Certainly connections are being made rhetorically about that. You know, the longer this is shut down, the harder it is to perhaps look for threats against the homeland or things like that. We've heard some dueling discussions about that. But the underlying issues around DHS seem pretty stuck still, where there was votes on the package that the House had sent over to the Senate. That didn't get anywhere. And there were dueling requests to pass. The Democrats wanted to pass a funding package that would cover everything except ICE and CBP, which are at the heart of that debate. We'll see if there's any progress in the coming week. There was, more discussion about maybe a plan or what to attach to it to deal with the underlying issues around immigration enforcement. But there seems to still be a distance between Democrats and Republicans on what that could look like if it was attached. So the shutdown doesn't seem like it's going to be quickly resolved, but it is certainly an issue that is kind of underneath and underlying a lot of the discussion.
Well, Senator Mullen is due to come up for his confirmation hearing this week. Do you think in the conversation around that he may make some promises that might shake some things loose?
It could, and a change in personnel and leadership at DHS could help move things along. But there are a couple things Democrats do want to see in law, whether it's warrant requirements in terms of going after people with immigration enforcement or the anti-masking language that they'd like to see in a bill. I don't know if he'll promise that, but we'll see what he says when he's on that stand in front of his colleagues, because he's still a sitting senator who will be before the senators on that Homeland Security Committee asking him questions. But again, change in leadership could be something that helps move that along. We'll have to see.
I'm speaking with Loren Duggan. He's Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government. Loren, one of the other spillover impacts is, of course, the rise in the cost of oil, which is playing out at the gas station, the fuel pump, and really resonating on the affordability issue. There are some proposals in both chambers of Congress that may tackle this. What are you hearing there?
I think they'll first of all start reviewing some of the steps the administration has taken, whether it's around the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and releasing barrels of oil from that, the talk of shipping, making it easier for foreign flag vessels to move things between ports by suspending the Jones Act. Those are two things I think Congress will weigh in on and maybe think about their reaction to that and talking to other officials. So we'll see if anything else legislatively comes together on that front. But, that could be something that comes up in these broader discussions around a supplemental or other debates. But nothing, to my knowledge, right on the agenda, given the things that are going to the floor this week. I'm not sure that they will be immediately tackling those issues.
Well, one of the ways the Republicans have been trying to tackle affordability is housing, and each chamber has its own housing bill. They seem to be pretty far apart on that. What do you think the debate will look like?
Well, we're in that classic stage where the House and Senate pass different versions of the bill, and I'm waiting to see how they try to resolve that. The old way was you form a conference committee and they hash it out in a room. We'll see if they go that approach or talk back and forth, maybe behind the scenes, and work something out there. But there does need to be some conferencing or at least discussion between the two versions because there are some differences. French Hill, the House Financial Services chairman, wanted his own bill. The Senate's bill has been percolating with some changes since last year, was briefly in the NDAA mix, but taken out of that, the defense authorization, which led us to this. So there's a lot of bipartisanship in this issue. There was a big bipartisan vote in the Senate. We'll see if the larger picture will allow them to move forward on some sort of compromise there.
It does seem like some pieces of legislation are moving forward. The Senate passed a SBIR reauthorization, although that's waiting on the House. The president was pretty vocal at the House GOP retreat on the SAVE Act. What do you think is going to be happening with the legislative agenda? Will things actually move forward?
There are some members of the House who have said they're not going to vote to pass a Senate bill until the Senate acts on the Save America Act, as it's now known. So we'll see how that plays out. But senators do have things they want to get done. They have things they have to get done when it comes to if there is a deal on Homeland Security funding. I don't think that will wait and it would move forward. We're going to get to other appropriations. But that Save America Act debate is, I think, in the coming weeks, going to be kind of overshadowing a lot. And this could be a key week as Republicans figure out what their approach is going to be to it.
FISA might also move forward.
FISA is one of those things that has a deadline in April, and because of the 2-week recess that's scheduled coming up, they really need to start laying the groundwork today and have the internal debates. And that's really an interesting one because you have conservative Republicans and civil liberties-oriented Democrats who are on one side against the faction of also Republicans and Democrats on the other, and how they cobble together whatever majority they need to either pass a clean extension or an extension that makes some changes or has a warrant requirement will be a big thing that plays out. And it's not one of those clean things where you can only have to follow one party or the other. You have to see how they're coming together on that. Some strange bedfellows in that debate, to be sure.
Well, speaking of strange bedfellows, let's talk about oversight hearings. There have been a lot of headlines over the last week that seemed that they might motivate some oversight hearings. FBI file security, Pentagon spending scrutiny. Do you think that they're actually going to crank up the oversight hearing process?
They could, and certainly, as I mentioned, with these budget hearings coming up and you have the key officials coming forward, you have the chance to ask them questions. We saw with Kristi Noem, who was there for Judiciary Committee hearings that are part of the normal business. She was asked about some specific contracts that people had scrutiny over. So I think anytime you get in front of either representatives or senators, you're going to have the opportunity to have to face those questions. Democrats, of course, are hoping that they have the gavels of some of these committees next year and will be setting the agenda and having those oversight processes. But where there's some bipartisanship behind questions around Pentagon spending or contracts, you can be sure those will come up in some of these hearings as officials make their way to the Hill.
I've been speaking with Loren Duggan. He's Deputy News Director for Bloomberg Government. Loren, certainly no shortage of headlines. Thanks for catching us up.
Thanks for having me.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.